I actually am up here. Okay, so again, I'm Lori Hollish. I'm PTA president, and PTA is totally on board with the vision that this school is bringing to our students. This is just an amazing place for our kids to be. So many great opportunities, and everybody that's here tonight, please take the opportunity. There's so many great things here for you. I really hope, especially you 8th graders, grab some of this stuff and go. You're not all going to be programmers, you're not all going to be engineers. Some of you are, some of you aren't, but you need this exposure. It's really good stuff, really important to have, so grab it. But besides that, what I really wanted to do was, again, we've taken a focus on computer science this year, and I wanted to introduce our keynote speaker. Her name is Helene Martin. She is a UW lecturer in the Computer Science and Engineering Department. She is a very strong proponent of computer science, the importance of computer science, early exposure to everybody. She started the computer science department program at Garfield High School. Again, she's a lecturer. She has basically inspired hundreds, maybe thousands of kids to pursue some kind of technology degree. She runs camps in the summer, and I actually have spoken with some of the kids that have taken your summer camps, and they're just very energized. So she's just a very strong proponent. Her favorite color is red, which is perfect because we are wildcats, and she loves to motorcycle. Come up and tell us. Helene Martin, please.
Thank you so much. And I was just saying, it's a rare occurrence that I'm not wearing any red. It couldn't have been a worse day to pick, right? I really should have made sure I had some on today. But here we go. I want to talk about computing. And my goal here, and it's nice to hear that it's in line with the schools, is that I want all of you who are interested in Project Mint to take Intro Computer Science next year. And I want all of you who are already on campus to take AP Computer Science, because there's so many great things that you learn when you take a computing course, and I hope that you all have a chance to get exposure to that. So, why computing? I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about my story, why I got involved in computing, and then I'll hopefully give you some other reasons to consider getting involved in computing. So, I, learned a lot of things about myself in high school, right? It's a time of self-discovery. And I actually learned I was a little bit lazy. And I know we were just talking about laziness and how sometimes that can deter students from taking challenging courses. But in my case, it actually is one of the big reasons that I was drawn to computing. So let me explain. So I'm a particular kind of lazy, and I still am, and I think that's okay. There's a lot of tasks where I like to work hard and excel, but there are certain tasks that are very tedious that really frustrate me. And you guys know what I'm talking about, right? It may be, you have this great math class and all of it is really fun, but then you get this one homework where you have to do the same thing like 500 times, right? That's happened before. Yeah, oh yeah, so he's groaning in the front, right? Or you have, the science class and you've collected a bunch of data and you need to do the same calculation over and over again. Oh, again, that's a lot of work, that's not that much fun. Maybe the science part is, but doing the same thing over and over again, definitely not. Or, this is a problem that I came across early on, that, again, this is where my laziness drew me to computing. I had a bunch of files that I had collected, maybe for different courses, and they weren't named very well. So I started renaming them by hand. And again, that's such a tedious task. It's not interesting. So I didn't want to do those things, and I started poking around, and my dad actually has a background in computing, so he encouraged me to start writing little programs to do those things. And that is a perfect thing for a lazy person, right? Because now I can spend some time writing a program that's going to allow me to rename all my files, and then I have this program forever, right? And every time I run into this issue, boom, I can run my program, right? So I don't have to think about it anymore. Or again, think about the science data example. Well, sure, it's going to take me a little bit of time to figure out what task I want to run over and over again. But once I do that, boom, I don't have to do these calculations over and over again. So, we were saying maybe laziness is not such a good thing, and I tend to agree, but there's a kind of laziness where you recognize that certain things are not that interesting to do, that I think actually can lead you to do some really interesting things with computing. So those were some examples of things I actually did when I was in high school. So I renamed all my files, I wrote some programs that helped me do my homework. I was still doing the interesting math part, right? But I could get the computer to do the calculations very quickly. And in fact, I would say that I learned much more from doing that, from automating these tasks, than I would have just doing them, repetitively over and over again. In particular, when I was writing a program to capture some, science idea, I was really having to understand what was going on scientifically, right? If I did a simulation that allowed me to see how gravity works, I really had to understand how that works. And so, one of my favorite quotes from a computer scientist is from a famous computer scientist called Don Knuth, and he says, it's often said that you don't understand something until you teach it, but really, you don't understand something until you write a program. Teach it to a computer, because the computer is not going to cut any corners. It's going to do exactly what you tell it to. And so by actually learning to write a program to perform a certain task, you understand it better than you ever could before. So that was sort of the things that drew me to computing. I also, I had the opportunity to take apart some computers and do things like that more on the hardware side, and that felt like a terrific puzzle. And I got to see large systems working together. And that's an incredibly important thing that more and more people in the workforce have to do. Work with very large systems, with interacting parts, and figure out not only how they work, but how you can fix them and do things like that. So I'm talking about computing broadly because there's a hardware side to it, there's writing programs, there's using existing programs. All of that has terrific value. So I also found that I started to see the world a little bit differently once I had started diving into computing. So when I came across a hard problem, I had more ability to kind of break that down, break down the puzzle, see how they all fit together. And that became fun rather than being tedious. So these kind of ideas that you get exposed to when you do computing can really change the way that you see the world. Now this is important because more and more fields are becoming information fields. So we just have a lot of data to work with. And, again, if we're lazy and we don't want to go through thousands and thousands of pages of data, then we need to know how to approach these problems computationally. So let me give you some examples. So let's say that we wanted to find out when the United States went from being thought of as a federation of states to being a single republic, right? This is an interesting kind of historical question. When did that happen? Well, how would a kind of classic historian do that? I don't know, is that really a thing? A classic historian? I don't know. A historian from 30, 40 years ago, what would they do? Well, they'd have to kind of go back to primary sources and read through them and kind of see when the language around the country sort of changed, when people were thinking about this a little bit differently. And certainly, you can find lots of primary resources, you can check them out at the library and figure out certain trends on dates and things like that. But again, I'm lazy. This seems like a lot of work. So wouldn't it be great if we just had all of the information from all of these books available to us digitally? And more this is becoming true. So maybe some of you guys know about Google Books, right? So Google Books Google Books is this project that's, transformed all of these historical documents and novels and so on into data. So now we have them digitally. And so we can start asking questions and automating finding the answer. So here's a very interesting graph, okay? And this is something a historian actually did. So we have, in red here, a bar that represents the frequency of the phrase, the United States are. And then in blue, we have the frequency of the phrase, the United States is, right? I mean, that's a very clever thing to look for, because we're seeing the difference between thinking of the United States as, a group of states versus a single country. And we notice this very clear point where the lines kind of cross over, and we go from thinking of the United States, again, as a loose group of states as one country. And then you can think, okay, what was historically significant then? Well, some of you might need a little refresher, so you should still learn your history. But 1866, end of the Civil War, so you can kind of see there was a trend before the Civil War towards thinking of the United States as one country, and that continued, and there was a pretty rapid drop-off after that, okay? So when you know how to think computationally, when you have a sense of the power of computing and what you can do with writing a computer program, then you can start asking these very clever kinds of questions. And you can approach a problem, like a historical problem, in a way that is fast and also has a much richer data set behind it, right? The historian who 40 years ago was taking books out of the library probably looked at 60 books, maybe. It took him a year and a half to write that paper. Well, this historian now is looking at virtually all of the books published in that time frame and is finding these phrases everywhere that they appear and getting some really interesting results. So when you know how to think computationally, right, it doesn't just mean that you can build new cool gadgets. It means that you can ask really interesting questions about the world in all aspects of your life. Let's say that you're really into physics. Well, then you recognize this. I'm not sure I would have necessarily, but this is the graphical representation of the Higgs boson, which made waves recently, right? A whole new particle that we've discovered. Well, definitely there was a lot of science that went behind that, right? Designing experiments, figuring out how to make the Large Hadron Collider, right? This is really great science happening. But it couldn't have happened unless we had people who could also think computationally about the problem. Because the Large Hadron Collider generates so much data every day. All experiments are just generating huge amounts of data. And again, we're lazy, but we're the good kind of lazy. We can't possibly look through millions or billions of data points. We have to find another way. So if we know how to think computationally, if we know that we can do this with this kind of automated computer program, well, then we can get these kinds of exciting results. So science, more and more, is becoming computational. So if you want to be involved in science, well, you better have some way of knowing at least what's possible to do with a computer. You don't have to do it yourself, but you have to be able to say, like, hey, Bob, I think you need to write a program for this, right? And some exposure to computing is important to do that. Well, I know that you guys are probably interested in solving the world's big problems, right? I mean, that's sort of what it's, what it's all about. When you're in high school, it's like, okay, I want to have meaning in my life. I want to solve big problems. So certainly, asking historical questions and answering them, is an important pursuit, and also, understanding the world better through these physics experiments is huge. But I know that a lot of students kind of in your generation are drawn to things like healthcare, right? Because what more, direct ways they're helping somebody than making them feel better when they're sick, right? So yes, absolutely. Well, more and more, medicine is also becoming computing-based, right? So from everything from personalized medicine to, so understanding what your current health situation is and making decisions based on that, to bring healthcare at scale to developing countries has a very strong computational aspect to it. Let me show you just one small example, and this may not be the most earth-shattering impact, but I think it's very interesting. So, and it's relevant too, right? How many of you have had the flu this year? Oh, wow, not very many. Okay, that's very cool. That's very cool. This year the flu epidemic hasn't been so bad, but every year there are flu epidemics throughout the states and across the world. And that can have a lot of impact. I mean, it has economic impact, people can't go to work. I mean, it's just crappy, right? Nobody wants to have the flu. So we want to try to find ways to make sure that we minimize the impact of something like the flu. Well, you guys might know that there is the Center for Disease Control that tries to warn people when there's about to be an outbreak and kind of give some guidance on how to approach, how to address that and make sure that you don't get sick. Well, the problem with the CDC is it's usually about a week late. So, you know, everybody already has the flu, and it's like, oh, hey, there's the flu, right? So here's an interesting project, and this actually happens to also be from Google. These are just examples. I know a lot of other companies are doing very interesting work in these kinds of spaces as well. So Google has a lot of information about all of you guys, right? And sometimes it sounds a little bit scary, but in this case, it can be really cool. So they were able to determine that there are certain patterns in searches that people do when they're sick. And you can kind of guess what those things are, right? But they build these really complex models of what people would search for when they're sick. And this is their prediction rate of the flu. So they are able to estimate when the flu is going to hit as it hits. It's about a week earlier than the CDC. So they can say, hey, watch out, you're at high risk, right? At the moment where you can actually protect yourself and make sure that you don't actually get sick. So again, with a computational approach to these kinds of problems, we have tremendous power, right? If doctors didn't have any computational background, they might not have thought of this, right? So Google works very closely with public health experts and doctors to come up with this. Now here's kind of an interesting thing. Some of you might notice that it did very poorly in 2013. Well, people started panicking about the flu very early in 2013, so they were searching frantically about flu-related terms when they weren't sick. And so that kind of threw off what Google was doing. So yes, it's not a panacea, right? It's not perfect. There are definitely some ways that these computer programs can misbehave, but it's definitely a very promising approach. So that's an example from healthcare. So, you know, again, solving the world's big problems. You know, we have not yet a crisis, but we certainly have certain natural resources that are dwindling. I mean, not here so much in Washington State, but some of you might know that California has a water problem, right? It hasn't rained very much this year. It's very hard to get access to fresh water. So that might be a kind of problem that you're interested in solving, right? Maybe you're interested in environmental studies or something like that. So surely there must be no way that computers can come and get involved in this, right? Well, this is a project that a friend of mine has been working on. And basically, the goal of this project is to give people a better sense of the resources that they use. So I don't know about you, but you know, I hope to do the best I can to conserve resources, but generally I have no idea how much water I use. I have no idea how much electricity I use. So I'm well meaning, but I have no way of knowing if I'm wasting things. So here's an example of a system that you could build that would report information about different appliances in your house and how much water they're using. So this would be useful, right? Then you could say, today I took an extra long shower, maybe I should adjust my ways a little bit, something like that. Well, this sounds expensive. It sounds like you're going to have, ways of measuring water on every appliance. Ooh, that doesn't sound so great. But here's a very little clever idea that this team came up with. And this is why I'm talking about computing broadly, not just computer science. Because what I'm going to mention in a minute has more to do with electrical engineering than computer science. We're talking about building sensors and so on. So what is this picture here? Well, this is kind of what your house's water network looks like. So you've got water coming into your house, there's a pressure regulator, and then all of your appliances are all connected together. The important thing is that it's a closed system. So every appliance is connected to every other appliance, which is connected to the entrance of water in your house. So when you turn on a certain tap, so for example, let's say you turn on the kitchen sink hot water, what happens? Well, since this is a closed system, there's movement happening throughout it, and there's a particular kind of signature to the way that the water comes out of this particular tap. So I don't know if this totally makes sense, but think about it this way. You can measure at any point in your house the changes in water pressure that are caused by some particular appliance. So all you actually need is one single sensor that you place in one location that learns what happens every time you open the tap for a particular appliance, and then boom, you have data about your entire house. So this is a very clever little application. It involves understanding of physics. It understands, it involves understanding of electrical engineering, building a sensor. And then we have programming, computer science to tie it all together and make it useful for our students to see. So again, you're interested in conservation, you're interested in environmental sciences. If you have a way of thinking computationally, you might come up with these great ideas that really make a difference. So I've talked about some of the exciting high-impact work that you can do in computer science. I want to talk about some of the opportunities that you guys might have very soon if you pursue this path. So this is, it's a little hard to see, but this is a lot of people, right? And you might recognize certain signs. Like this is a Yelp banner here, and this is, you can see Expedia. So this is a career fair at the University of Washington where I teach. And these are all students who are not much older than you guys in high school, right? They're in college. And they are, looking for internships and full-time jobs. The companies that come there are very aggressive in recruiting. They're like, hey, you want to work for me, right? You don't want to talk to the other guy, you want to work for me. And they just need this talent. Because as we were just hearing, there's this huge gap in how many people these companies would like to hire and who's actually there. So this is a good deal, right? You can solve some of the world's biggest problems. Things like healthcare. Things like, resource management. And you can be fought over for your efforts. So that's pretty cool. This is a picture here from Google Office. So you guys have probably seen this before, but I hadn't seen this one. This is an indoor orange grove. I don't know. Apparently it's a nice, it looks like a pretty nice spot to be, right? So definitely the computing world really values people who can take a problem, decompose it, and come up with a solution that is computational in nature. So you get a lot of very nice things out. So these are some of the things that you can look forward to. There's also lots of opportunities for you guys now. Whether you're middle school, whether you're high school, there's tons of things to get involved in. First of all, you're all going to sign up for Intro Computer Science and AP Computer Science, right? So that will be a good start. We also have a lot of programs at UW. We have summer camps and other things. So I hope that some of you will join us there as well. So to conclude, hopefully I kind of showed you by my own story that computing is incredibly useful. And it's also empowering. The feeling that I got when I was able to write a little program to quickly do my math homework was like nothing else. And I chose this picture of these two lovely ladies at one of our summer camps because I think it just captures the way that I feel when I get to solve a problem computationally, and I now have this solution that I can use over and over and over again. So it's incredibly empowering, and it's just fun. It's just fun to be able to take a problem, build a solution to it, and say, I made that. I made that, and I didn't have to buy, steel at a high price and then get some tools and risk chopping off my hand. I built that, and I didn't have to worry about those things. Right? That is really important. From history to physics, and healthcare, and sustainability. Fields are becoming information fields. We get to collect all of this great data. And so then we have to have a way of processing it. And that involves computing. So understanding how computing works gives you access to these really great solutions in all these different fields. So you don't have to be a computer scientist to be involved in computing. In fact, I would say that no matter what you choose to do, you're going to be involved in computing. So you better have a little bit of background so that you can be the best you can be at it. And then finally, the opportunities are fantastic. The kinds of work that people do when they have a computing background is absolutely phenomenal. Whether, again, they are computer scientists or they are scientists who use computing or public health officials who use computing, there's just phenomenal opportunities. The last thing I wanted to leave you with related to that is we saw that there's huge STEM worker shortage, and that's absolutely true, particularly in the Seattle area. But what often goes unsaid is that 71% of those jobs that need filling and that are going to grow over the next 10 years are actually computing jobs. So yes, there's a STEM shortage, but again, 71% of that is actually computing related. So there's lots of great things to do, and I hope that you'll just find it fun to be involved in computing. I hope many of you join us in this amazing venture. There's just, again, so many possibilities. They're endless, and I wish you great luck in all of your endeavors. Thank you.